Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to another Burlingame. It's a small-town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. This is Mark Lucchese, also known as Mark at the Mic, and my guest today needs no introduction because in this city, he is known as Mr. Burlingame. Raziel Ungar is all about homegrown. Born in Burlingame at Peninsula Hospital, he defected for a short time to Warnick Elementary School in Foster City, came back and attended Burlingame Intermediate School, and graduated from BHS in 2000. He defected again, going to Los Angeles, where he attended and graduated from UCLA with a degree in economics. He has a strong passion for real estate and video and combines both, as you will hear. He also gives back to Burlingame in several ways. And now my conversation with Mr. Burlingame, Raziel Ungar. Raziel, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. Excited to be on the show here.
You know what? It's great having a Lion Hogue neighbor on the show with me. I think you're maybe only the second or third person from Lion Hogue I've had on. So
well, when we bought our house, I heard you were nearby that the price went up a little bit because of that premium. But
what we need to see is more walking tours of Lion Hogue, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show, okay?
Sure.
So I mentioned in the intro that you went to school here in Burlingame. You're homegrown for sure, and we're going to talk about your years after UCLA, but I'd like to know what it was like for a youngster growing up in the 80s and the 90s and into the 2000s. I mean, talk about middle school. You can talk about Burlingame High a little bit, and maybe we'll even touch on that great Eagle Scout project that you had going on.
Yeah, you know, it's funny that we're shooting or recording this in the library now because they had that mural that said something like living in Burlingame is a special privilege. And I remember seeing that back in the day. And, you know, I really feel that as an adult when I look back on my childhood in Burlingame. I mean, that's all I knew. I just figured this was normal. But, you know, having gotten out in my 20s and 30s and 40s, traveling other parts of the country or world, like, I feel so grateful to have grown up here and that my parents just made that choice in 1980 to move here from New York. Like, I feel there's a lot of luck involved with a lot of things, and I just feel very lucky.
Is that when they came out here in the 80s?
Yeah, they moved in 1980. My parents were living in Queens and Forest Hills. My dad was a rabbi there, and his poker buddy said, "Irv, there's a rabbi job opening in Burlingame, California." This is 1980. And my mom's like, "Oh, well, we want to start a family. We want to move out of New York." So my parents moved in 1980, and my dad became the rabbi at Peninsula at Temple Shalom.
That's on
Sebastian up on the hill.
Yeah,
off of
at the top, right?
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Because of my dad's poker buddy, so he was the rabbi there for until about I think 1986, and yeah, that's kind of it.
Did he retire after that, or what happened?
He got into the business world and art world after he moved on from being a rabbi.
Yeah. And you must have been born around 82, 81,
exactly,
82. Yeah. Same age as my daughter. That's great stuff, man. Yeah. Okay. So tell me about what it was like going to middle school, Burlingame High School, stuff like that. Did you hang out at certain places with certain guys? You play sports?
Good question. Yeah. So I remember BIS. I remember Mr. Osberg in particular, Osberg Field.
Correct. He had passed away, and there was quite a crowd at his
he was a legend.
He was a legend.
And I remember, when you're in middle school, it's for the students to respect a teacher or someone in administration was a huge deal.
Yep.
And he really had that respect of the whole community. And now as a parent, seeing his son Jeff out there coaching and, soccer, I've been out there and you could see he seems like a great guy too.
Yeah.
So I do great memories at BIS, BHS too, being class of 2000. It was a great place to go to high school. It's not too big of a school, not too small of a school.
Yeah.
A lot of different groups of people, but I just liked it. I feel like being at BIS and BHS really prepared me for being the person I am today. Some things were amazing and smooth. Some things were more challenging.
Right.
But I feel better because of that.
Were you involved in band, sports, drama, anything like that?
Yeah, I was in sports. I played tennis and ran cross country.
Yeah. Was that Obi? Was Obi the coach back
Obi.
then? Steve O'Brien, Obi.
Yeah. Loved Obi.
Yeah. That's terrific.
Yeah, everyone loved him too. A lot of respect.
Yeah.
He pushed people pretty hard and got the best out of everyone. And
Did Burlingame High have open campus back then? In other words, could you leave the campus at lunchtime?
It wasn't an open campus.
Right, so you stayed on campus.
I remember if someone were to try to leave campus, that wasn't a good outcome.
Right.
Back then.
Did you have a place that you liked to hang out with your buddies after school, or what would you do after school?
Well, I just remember, obviously, the donut shop was a critical piece of my childhood. I mean, I love their chocolate old fashioned.
Yeah.
Copenhagen. I remember La Piñata back in the day.
Yep. Copenhagen, I think you're a big fan of their chocolate. I call them the chocolate rings. You call them the chocolate pizza. I think it's great.
I mean, they're technically the chocolate chip coffee cake, but why not? I mean, Ralph and Sherry and Ben, they're Burlingame institutions and love what they've done there, importing hundreds of pounds of butter a week from Copenhagen.
Crazy, isn't it? Yeah. I know that.
And I'm sure you can appreciate with your role at Molly Stone's importing all that butter. That's a big deal.
Oh, it's a real big deal, man. They're terrific, and what they've since sold, and I think Sherry still kind of works there once in a while.
Yeah.
That's great. So were you a Sam Sandwich guy or anything like that?
I wasn't really aware of Sam Sandwiches, and I feel like I definitely have FOMO. I kind of missed out on the whole Sam Sandwich thing, but I know they're a big part of the lore too.
Yeah. So, your walking tours, your video walking tours are amazing, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes, but did you see, as you're doing them now, and whatever this is, 2024, and going back to the year you graduated, you must see a lot of differences on the Avenue, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember the Ave. I mean, a lot of people, think back fondly to what the Ave was like back, a long time ago, and it was just all mom and pop shops.
Yeah.
And I feel like now, we have some more of the big corporate stuff. I don't think anything of it's a negative. I feel like businesses are coming that they feel people want to spend money at and shop at. So I feel like the city's done a good job of maintaining that mix. And sure, we can complain about the high rental prices, but if the businesses are willing to pay them, that's certainly, it's where the market is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think changes are good. Yes, sometimes you feel like you've got a mall effect, but I'll tell you what, if you ever walk down that avenue on a Saturday and Sunday, it seems to be working.
You're absolutely right.
Packed.
I was chatting with a friend of mine who's a very successful real estate guy in Palo Alto, and he was telling me how he's been buying real estate in Burlingame. I was like, well, why not University Ave or in that area? He's like, oh, Raziel, Burlingame Ave is hands down the best downtown in the whole peninsula.
Yeah.
Even more than University.
Yeah. Your walking tour was fantastic, and I want to make sure our listeners know that. They can bring it up on YouTube. It's terrific, as well as your other ones. But like I said, we'll talk a little bit about that later on. So let's see. You're an Eagle Scout, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Always an Eagle Scout, right?
Very proud of that.
I know you are. What was that project you did? Was it your junior year or senior year?
Yeah, it was right around there, a little before that. I did a survey of historic homes in Burlingame. I had read an article, you probably remember the Boutique and Villager Mark.
I sure do.
And they had done a front page article about the old Fox Theater, kind of near where the old First Republic Bank is, right on California near Broadway.
Yeah.
And they had torn down that theater. And I remember reading, and I was thinking about what to do as my project then. And many of my other fellow Eagle Scouts were doing projects that were, just a different type of project.
Let me interrupt. Were some of these other fellow Eagle Scouts Burlingame High guys too, or were they from all over the place?
No, they were all Burlingame
They
guys.
were,
Yeah.
Okay.
Garrett Cortez was a close friend of mine, got his Eagle. And anyways, it was Dan Kasuga, fabulous experience.
Right.
So I remember reading the article in the Boutique, talked about the Fox Theater. I was like, gosh, like that kind of was a cool structure. The city didn't really have anything in place about preserving historic structures. And now you think about this in the context of 2024, it's kind of a controversial topic. Everyone has an opinion on it.
Oh, yeah.
But my feeling back then as like a 16-year-old was, hey, like, why do they need to tear that down? Like, it was kind of a cool building. So I thought, let me do a survey of some historic sites. I worked with Martha Rosman May at the Burlingame Historical Society, of course, a legend. And a quick story on Martha. I worked with her closely on my Eagle Scout project, and I don't know if I told you this, but fast forward about 10, 12 years ago when my wife and I buy our first house in Burlingame, we move into the house on Burlingame Avenue, and a few days later, older woman knocks on our front door with a bag of persimmons, and sure enough, it's Martha Rosman May. We bought the home across the street from her.
Isn't that great? Yeah.
And so it just kind of came full circle there, buying a home on Burlingame Avenue.
Yep.
And, you know, she's there, I'm there, we both care a lot about
She was one of the
Burlingame.
founders of the Historical
I believe so,
Society.
yeah.
And to piggyback on your story, when I first got to Molly Stone's in Burlingame, she came by the store one day and brought me a picture of my dad's store, Jim Super, which is where Citibank is located today. And I now have it framed in my room. So it was...
Love that.
Yeah, she was terrific. But anyway, back to your Eagle Scout.
Yeah, so I was like, you know, it'd be cool if maybe I could do some type of booklet, some presentation, present it to the city council. Back then, I remember Kathy Baylock was in the council and some other, you know, Burlingame locals. And my goal is to kind of stimulate a conversation around the preservation, or at least consideration of preservation, of some of these historic structures.
Right.
Eventually, that turned into like what happened in Burlingame Park, right, with the designation there. Obviously, there's different feelings on that, but overall, like I think it's a positive, right?
Yeah.
It just says you can't just go knock something down. If you're a developer, and obviously I'm in real estate and I'm pro development, you know, however, there's a little bit of a middle ground, perhaps. I don't know if it was threaded perfectly, but I do think it's you know, overall it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the end result of your project? Was it a brochure or a pamphlet, or was it just an idea?
It was a booklet that I put together.
It was an actual booklet.
Yeah, it was probably 12, 14 pages.
Yeah,
and I
'cause
had
there's-
some photos in there of different places.
I think there's 28 different places that
You're right.
you wrote about and had pictures of and stuff,
Did a
right?
paragraph or two. I did some research with Martha, and I just was trying to kind of highlight these different structures as kind of perhaps historic. And most of them weren't necessarily single family homes, right? It was just different buildings as well.
Right, there was a lot of buildings in there I thought were really cool. Is that pamphlet or brochure still around? Is it somewhere hidden or what?
There's a copy in my parents' house.
Yeah.
And then I've got one at my house, and then you know, I could probably post it online. It was fun.
Well, I think I would like to talk to Jennifer over at the Historical Society. I think you should come to one of the quarterly meetings and roll a slideshow on that.
That would be
talk
fun.
about the
Yeah,
things.
throwback.
Because they're terrific. They really are. So, okay. So you're still an Eagle Scout at heart, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. What's all the buzz about the Burlingame buzz? What was the Burlingame buzz?
Yeah, so the Burlingame buzz, it's more the past tense. It was an idea that I had in my early to mid 20s.
This was after UCLA?
After UCLA. I went to UCLA to study film. However, ended up not pursuing the film path. There I studied education and economics, but I did have some time to intern at Sony Picture Studios. I worked at Jeopardy for 6 months as an unpaid intern. I can tell you all kind of funny stories about Jeopardy and Wheel and Trebek and Adam Sandler's Happy Madison Productions across the street. That was fun.
Well, I bet.
So I was just like 19, 20 years old going, you know, riding the big blue bus in Santa Monica down to the Sony lot. And so I did that. I worked at KPIX TV as an unpaid intern once.
That would have been up here, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I kind of had that creative interest, and then I decided to pursue real estate. And so in the beginning of my career, what I had was a lot of time and no business. I thought, well, growing up in Burlingame, geez, like people are going to call me to help them with their real estate stuff. And I was sure wrong. You know, I realized, hey, it's like anything. You have to work hard, build a reputation, have a track record and earn people's trust over many years. Yeah. And so in the beginning, I thought, well, let me focus on doing some videos to showcase Burlingame's kind of unique identity. So I did about 4 dozen documentary-style short films with a friend of mine, Mark Bracamonte, and they were all about 2 to 3 minutes in length. We put them on YouTube, which is still up to this day on my original YouTube channel, and it was a lot of fun. We did a red carpet premiere downstairs here at the library in the Lane Room, and we showed them all. It took about an hour. There were maybe 200-300 people, if I could recall, who came to the premiere, basically.
So were you just like in your beginning stages of shooting video back then, or film? Was it film or video when you were doing that?
Yeah, I mean, we just had a basic video camera.
Yeah.
And then my friend Mark would, we'd say, okay, let's go shoot this neighborhood, or let's do sports in Burlingame.
Right.
Or there was, we did one on, I don't know if you remember Drew Schiller.
Sure do.
So we followed him. He was a, three sport athlete, played point guard at Stanford.
Was this before YouTube, though? YouTube wasn't even around then.
It was in the early stages of YouTube.
It was.
Yeah. And so I was still trying to figure it out, but we posted the videos there, and they were very popular.
Yeah.
They were great for business, and I just truly enjoyed them, showcasing our wonderful small town and what made it special. I did a lot of different restaurants, did a video on Stella Alpina when they were across the street here.
Yeah, right.
With Elisa and Matteo Ferrari, and Copenhagen Bakery and, some places that are no longer around too. But it was really fun.
Were you writing the scripts as well for all of that? I mean, the dialogue and
exactly. Yeah. Worked on a script. Kind of veered off script sometimes depending on how I was feeling for the video. But,
and your friend Mark, was he holding the camera or what was going on?
He was behind
there?
the camera. And he'd say, Raziel, do this, do that. Or, I like how you're doing this. Maybe focus a little more here. And
was he somebody that went to Burlingame High? Or
he went to Burlingame High too.
Okay.
Yeah, and he got into the film world and we kind of reconnected again after school.
Yeah. So how long did the Burlingame buzz last?
That was about, I don't know, maybe a 1 to 2 year project that we did.
And this was while you were still a novice in the real estate world.
Yeah.
Trying to cut your teeth, as they say, or whatever. Mm-hmm. So what did that lead to? The buzz had to lead to something, right?
Because, so the buzz, well, a few years later, it led to My Monet, which was a children's art exhibition that I did at Washington Park with Janice Prey-Wolf. She helped me out with that. And then we had a bunch of different kids submit artwork that we displayed. I remember we did that at Art in the Park. And we called it My Monet.
And Art in the Park, was it Washington Park?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was super fun.
Yeah.
Just kind of exhibiting a lot of the kids' art. And then a couple years later, I worked with Jennifer and the whole Historical Society for the Burlingame 100 Centennial. And we did a wine and hot chocolate walk and some other fun activities. So, and then I served on the Burlingame committee for, I think it was 2030 for the city plan. And so every few years, there's a little something that pops up for Burlingame that I just get really involved in, and it's fun to
I think you did a little something over at the community center.
Yeah,
when it opened, I think you were in. I mean, you have a lot going on. Let's put it that way.
We just supported one of the rooms there. It was kind of meaningful for me, having grown up. And
at that point, were you thinking about, okay, this stuff's going to help me in real estate, or were you still just doing it as kind of a hobby, or what? What was?
I mean,
what was the
all
deal
these
there?
things. Sure. I mean, my parents always taught me, like, if you just do the right thing, good things will happen.
Yeah.
In personal, professional, all that. So I always try to lead with like the generosity and the gratitude. And if people, can appreciate what you're doing, that can certainly translate into business success. And I feel like Burlingame has given a lot to me. And so it's only appropriate to give back to when you do well.
Right. So as your real estate career started to blossom a little bit, I guess that'd be the word to use. Did you think, okay, I'm going to take these videos now to a new level because they're really well done, man?
Yeah, we're still trying to get better and struggling with it, but I think they're taking off a little bit. So I started. I took a long gap of 10 plus years on the video as kind of my career moved in a positive direction, and I recently realized over the last year or two that it was something that I really enjoyed and something that I missed creatively. And a friend of mine in San Francisco, she was doing something similar with video, and that kind of inspired me to get back into it, Mark.
Yeah.
And so now my goal is to put out a lot of local content.
Well, you're putting out a lot. I mean, are you putting out one a week or what?
Yeah, that's my goal.
I don't understand how you find the time to do that, man. So give us a little example here. Let's say you're going to shoot a 10-minute walking video of some of the streets in Hillsborough.
Sure.
So let's say you go out today with your camera and maybe your crew, and you shoot it. How long does it take from the time of shooting to the time it gets up on YouTube?
Well, probably about a month.
It's about a month.
Yeah.
Because you got to edit and all this kind of stuff, I guess, and review it.
Well, we come up with a script.
Right.
We write out the whole script.
Do you write it out?
Yes, I do the whole outline myself, and then I have a couple folks who I also work with on some of the writing and ideas.
To kind of polish it up a little bit.
Yeah, and so it's a huge team effort. I'm just one piece of the puzzle there.
Yeah.
And I'm in front of the camera, of course, but no, there's a few other people who support me behind the scenes on the content side, on the editing side, on the camera side. So for every, each video is probably anywhere from 30 to 50 hours of time.
I bet. It's crazy.
So it's a lot.
Yeah.
I have a respect for anyone who's does this professionally.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
So for a while, you must have been a kind of a one-man band or maybe a two-man band. You were using you and your buddy Mark, right?
Yep. So that was in my mid-20s.
Right.
And then now, I've just invested in a different way and have a little bit more bandwidth to invest in and having really smart, savvy, kind people around me.
Okay. So I'm wondering, let's say we're going to want to do a Burlingame neighborhood this week.
Yes.
How in your mind do you select a particular neighborhood?
Well, we try to think about what is the angle that we're going for in the video. What's the takeaway that we want the viewer to have, right? Instead of just kind of reading a blog post, which would be kind of not as exciting. It has to be, you have to have a hook in the beginning. You have to have some different points throughout. You have to kind of drop a little teaser in the beginning of, hey, we're going to catch this later. So you want to keep people constantly engaged. So we think about, okay, what would I find interesting as the viewer? So I'm not trying to read what's on Wikipedia or, some other website, where I'm trying to share from my personal experience what I think is interesting about this topic.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to be shooting something like streets of Hillsborough or different neighborhoods of Hillsborough or Burlingame, then we would figure out what streets we're going to focus on, and then we'd go to those streets, and then we'd film it.
Right.
Yeah. And I always liked having motion in the video too, because rather than just being behind the screen, I feel like having motion and movement.
Like when you're driving in the car
Yes.
or you're walking down the street.
I think it's a little more authentic too.
It is.
Right? And so I kind of like that. It makes it feel like, my hope is that the viewer feels like that they're with me and that I'm just kind of having a conversation with them. That's
How are
my
you
goal.
doing the car videos? Is there somebody in the passenger seat? Because you're kind of driving, aren't you?
Yeah.
Or do you just stick one of those
no, I'm not.
iPhone?
I just have my video guy. He would just be in there.
He's in there with you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and you guys are cruising down the street.
Yeah.
Those are terrific.
Yeah, I got the idea from James Corden. He had that really famous TV show.
Yeah.
Carpool Karaoke.
Okay, well, great stuff. What about the one where you're walking down Burlingame Avenue? You're going to all the merchants and stuff. Are you just doing that one on your own?
Yeah, that was my downtown Burlingame video, and that I just used my camera, and then I thought I was going to do it in one take, but then eventually took me 3 different days to rehearse it and practice it that I felt comfortable.
Yeah.
Because I should have mentioned that, or that business I didn't know as much about, or let me go. So I kind of would do a whole walkthrough like you would do with any production.
Right.
Make some mistakes.
A rehearsal.
And then figure it out. And so finally, after the 3rd day, I felt like I had a good understanding. And then I also had a bunch of notes on a piece of paper that I just kind of held in one hand and camera in the other hand. And so that was like, make sure that these are some highlights that I didn't want to forget.
Yeah. So basically you're giving up a day of being at the office per se, letting your staff kind of take over, your sales associates, right? And you're working on the video concept of it.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take too long now that I've gotten the hang of it to go out and shoot what we call the A-roll for the video, which is like with me and the camera person, versus the B-roll when it's more the camera person capturing footage that will kind of layer in. Mm-hmm. So now we're probably anywhere from, hour to 2 hours to shoot that.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
At least for my time, that's the shortest part of the investment of time is the A-roll.
Yeah.
The rest is the script creation, and then also a bunch of back and forth on the editing, which I'm involved in, and make sure we go through usually a few rounds. So.
You use some pretty cool techniques. One of them that I really like is when you use the map of the city and you kind of blow it up.
Yeah.
And you got the pencils going all over the place and you're circling and showing things. I mean, that's pretty cool stuff, man.
Yeah, thank you. That was in my walking tour video, and I hope to continue doing more like that.
Yeah, it's good stuff. What do we got, an incoming here?
No, that was my timer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought we had an incoming, Raziel.
Yeah, all good.
We good?
Yeah.
All right. Also, the overheads of these cities are fantastic. Are you using drone work, or is that stock film from someplace?
No, that's a good question. Yeah, so we've all the local stuff. Well, I'd say 80 to 90% is footage that we've shot with drone.
Yeah,
and then the other 10 to 20% is usually stock footage that I've licensed from a couple different websites.
And it's cool to shoot with drones. I mean, nobody gets upset that you're taking a shot of their backyard with mom sunbathing or anything like that. Not that you do, but there's no issues with drones, I guess.
No, I mean, it's totally legal. Obviously, we want to be respectful. And if we, I mean, being respectful is more important than what's legal, right? So we just want to always take the high road there. I don't believe I've seen any footage of anyone in a backyard.
You haven't.
Yeah.
I've watched quite a few, but I'm just wondering how people react to that. Maybe they don't even notice it.
They probably don't notice.
Yeah.
I mean, I think drone technology has been around for a while. It's a consumer, if you have a drone, under a certain weight, then I actually bought a drone a few weeks ago just so I could understand the logistics of what's involved.
Yeah.
And they're so simple to fly. just takes you a few minutes to learn how they work. And obviously you're responsible if the drone falls out of the sky. I mean, you want to be careful about where you're flying the drone too.
Right. So where do you buy a drone, man? At Best Buy, or you go online?
You can buy one on Best Buy.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, we just use a simple drone from DJI.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they're depending on what you buy, they're from $400 to $1,000.
Yeah.
And they have just small batteries and a little screen. And
I love the one of my favorite videos was the one where you compared the three wealthy cities, I guess you would say. Was it Atherton, Hillsborough, and Woodside?
Yeah, and Portola Valley.
And Portola Valley, yeah. That was really great comparisons.
That was a lot of fun.
It had to be. But something like that you don't shoot in one day.
No, usually for that video we did 3 different locations. So I went to each of those 3 towns that we're highlighting.
Yeah.
So it just depends on what the topic is. If we'll be on location for all 3, sometimes we'll just do a video where I'm walking around Washington Park just to kind of get some movement, or maybe I had something else pop up on my work schedule that we needed to shorten the location list. So we just kind of work on it as we go.
And you have about 40-something videos up right now, don't you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, something like that?
Yeah.
Where can somebody find you on YouTube?
They could just type in my name, Raziel
Ungar, huh?
Or they could also type in living in San Mateo County, California.
Yeah.
That's kind of the name for my channel.
Yeah.
So that's my goal, is for people who either live here and they want to know more, or for people who are from out of the area who wish to learn a little bit more, maybe they're thinking of moving here.
I thought they were especially cool for anybody that just wants some information on where they live, because I love seeing the neighborhoods of Burlingame and San Mateo. That was fun stuff, man. I don't know if I missed this or not. Did you do one of Palo Alto?
I have not.
Yeah, because they've got some pretty cool, University in California are kind of like Burlingame Ave and Broadway to me, and they've got great neighborhoods as well. So
absolutely,
there's today's tip from Mark at the Mic. Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I'd like to move into real estate, but in a general sense.
Perfect.
If you don't mind, I've just got some questions that I think folks might be interested in. But before we get into the real estate, I'm just wondering, with all these real estate shows that are on TV, mostly Bravo, I guess, do you watch $1 Million Listing, Selling Sunset, Buying Beverly Hills, or anything? Do you ever watch those things?
I've watched them a little bit, but it's hard for me to watch because none of that is real. It's all stage stuff.
Really?
Right? Yeah. I mean, it's not that exciting. I mean, most of my clients that I work with, they're all like pretty normal people.
Yeah.
And so I don't really have a ton of drama that someone would want to hang out, put a camera crew next to me for 10 hours and say, we hope that there's, some crazy thing that happens in 30 seconds.
Right.
So you need to have huge personalities, and then those huge personalities need to have clients who have huge personalities and have all kinds of issues and drama.
Yeah.
So just like any reality stuff, I mean, I had a friend who was on a show in Palo Alto. He was an agent in Palo Alto. It's called My First Home. And he told me that his clients had also appeared on the show with him, but they had bought their home a year before. And so they came back and they toured his clients around different houses, and the camera crew was there, but they already bought the house a year before. So it was like totally fake.
Right.
But I think they're entertaining. And
they're entertaining.
And if people enjoy them, but it's not really a snapshot into what real estate is like.
How come it hasn't caught on up here in the Bay Area?
Because we don't have the divas and the personalities that you do in New York and LA and Miami and these other major markets. Like here, there's a lot of really fantastic realtors and colleagues that I have.
Yeah.
And sure, there's certain people who maybe have larger than life personalities that we might know. But I think like those markets, they're a little bit more sexy from that perspective.
Yeah. You know what I think? I think there are a bunch of UCLA grads down there, man.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah, all different types.
All right. Let's get serious here for a minute. All right. So when you inspect the property of a potential seller, let's say I'm going to sell my home, right?
Yeah.
And what are you looking for as far as when you come in? Are you looking at the aesthetics of the home? In other words, geez, it could use a new kitchen. It could use some landscaping, some interior, exterior painting. What hits you?
I mean, the first thing is just more like, what is your goal? If you're selling your house, like, is it a quick sale? Is it the highest possible price, which is usually what most of my clients are, focused on.
Right.
And then they'll say, hey, what are the things that you might recommend to help us obtain the highest possible price with a smooth outcome and a positive experience and all that. So I'm very cognizant of like my clients' money in the transaction, but also their mental health. So we can go through a smooth transaction and they can emerge at the end and say, hey, I mean, it'd be a big compliment. People are like, hey, that was so much fun. I'd love to do it all over again. But most people don't say that. No one says that. But like, hey, that was smooth and we felt heard and that was fair.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, I mean, yes, a lot of times we look at, are there things we can do that will improve how the home presents visually? So that could be landscaping, painting, hardwood floors, refinishing, updating any light fixtures, painting kitchen cabinets. Those are very, like, you get very good ROI for those things because it's all about photography and marketing and how you present a property, and the staging is important. And then if the home and pest inspections turn up anything that the agent feels could be meaningful, you'll see typically the agent will suggest to the homeowner, hey, these things like the cracks in the foundation, it seems, even though your home's been here for 30, 40 years, maybe we should have an engineer take a look at that and maybe get an estimate to repair that if it's something that's meaningful. So that way the buyer has a lot more context and understanding about what they're buying. And if the seller's expecting a premium price, then the buyer usually wants to feel pretty good if they are paying a premium price that they understand what the condition is of what they're buying.
Okay, so all of these cost a lot.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard, and I'm a real novice at this whole thing. That's why you're on the show. Is that people can have things done, and they won't have to pay for them right up front. It'll come out of the cost of the real estate sale. Is that true, or can you help me with that a little bit?
I would say most folks around here will typically just write checks for those improvements. However, the company where I work has a program called Concierge where they will give an interest-free loan to the homeowner to pay for these out-of-pocket things in advance. There's a small, very minor fee associated with that.
Right.
But let's say the seller was going to spend $20,000, $30,000 to prepare the home to go on the market, which is a huge number, but not uncommon around here given the value of the real estate.
Yeah.
And they wanted to invest that money to helping present it as best possible. Then the company would loan that money interest-free to the seller. The seller can go ahead and pay for those items, and then the company would be reimbursed out of the proceeds of the sale.
Yeah. Is it better to think minor things like painting and carpets or whatever or hardwood floors versus maybe a kitchen remodel, which can cost thousands of dollars, or bathroom remodels, or thinking that the new owner will want to do what they want to do when they come in?
I think you're exactly right, Mark. I mean, the goal is to freshen up the home and help it present as best as possible in the way it is now. Because you're right, if it's someone's going to come put in a new kitchen shockingly could be anywhere from $80,000 to $120,000.
Yeah, I caught that on your video. That's why I thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah, it's so expensive.
Yeah.
And so most of the time for just prepping a home to go on the market, that's a little more of an ambitious project that typically is left to the buyer.
Right. Okay.
But the buyer might say, hey, look, I'd certainly love it to be move-inable and totally nice. But like I remember, I don't know about you probably, but when my wife and I bought our first house, we had brown countertops in the kitchen. We had beautiful pink tile in our bathroom.
We had the same.
Yeah, the same.
Yeah.
And so, hey, it didn't really bother me.
Yeah.
And we lived with that for, 7-8 years.
And you do.
And then we remodeled the house and it's a newer house now.
Yeah.
But, so every house is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
okay.
But I'd say the more that we kind of pass along in time, the less buyers want to, write the checks themselves. People are busy, they have a lot going on, they have kids, and the more they would prefer that the home be prepared in a way that they can just kind of move into.
Yeah.
And then that will help open up the buyer pool and help the seller achieve a better number.
When a real estate agent or the agency is going to pay for do the loan, are the agents bringing in their own people to work on it, or is it up to the seller to grab the carpenter and you know what I mean? How does that work? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
I would say most realtors will have trusted relationships with different vendors who they refer to.
Right.
And then the seller, if they wish to choose to work with those vendors, they can.
But there's no obligation.
There's no obligation.
Okay.
It's totally up to them. And you might say, hey, Mark, look, I have my neighbor's a painter and I've been, I really trust him. Great. Work with so the goal, it's not a profit center for the realtor. It's more just a value add if they can recommend some trustworthy people.
What about staging? Is that pretty much status quo nowadays, going on all the time?
I would say so. And it's interesting you mentioned that in Europe, no one stages. It's a uniquely American phenomenon.
Really?
Yeah. And so something that's a little funny, I can totally respect when people are like, why should I stage like the home? No one buying it for the furniture. However, the important thing to appreciate is that every buyer now is starting their search online, regardless of whether you're a 20-something or you're in your 70s or 80s and you're downsizing. everyone is starting their search online. And so people are looking at the photos and the digital presentation first before making a decision if they want to go see the property.
Yeah.
Now, if you live in Burlingame or you're renting, you might say, hey, look, I already know that location. I probably driven past that house. I'm going to go see the house. But if you live in the city or you're relocating, I'm working with some folks now who are in the South, and they're submitting an offer on a property in Belmont this week, and they have not seen the house in person. So we've done some FaceTime tours. So the presentation is very important for that part of the process.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
Yeah.
How often do you meet clients that tell you or say to you, we're selling as is? And what does as is mean?
Okay, good question. So I was taught in the very beginning of my career, as is just means as disclosed. So it doesn't relieve the seller of any obligation to disclose material defects, which basically means in plain English, if the seller knows something about the house that a buyer could find helpful or valuable, the seller is required by California law to disclose that information to a prospective buyer. And what that is, you could say it's a little subjective, but I used to teach Home Buying 101 and Home Selling 101 actually at CSM for 8 years through the community education program. And so we get a lot of questions where people come to my class, hey, I'm not planning to sell my home for 5-10 years. That's why I'm taking this in an academic setting. I don't want to go to an open house and feel pressure or have a bunch of agents come in. So it was just really fun to kind of talk about it. And so I remember in the beginning of my career, my mentor, who I'm very grateful for, her name was Jen Petty. She taught me so many things, and I wouldn't be here where I am without her. Anyway, she taught me, like, she had one experience with some clients who had a home on a hill in San Mateo, something like that. And I might be conflating the story a little bit, but it was basically something like the buyer moved in and they said, oh, and then the neighbor came up to the buyer and said, hey, it's November. Do you need some sandbags for your driveway? And the buyer's like, oh, what are you talking about? And the neighbor's like, oh, well, for something like the last 10 or 20 years, every November, all the neighbors put sandbags in front of their driveways to prevent when the big storm comes. Mm-hmm. Well, the seller hadn't disclosed that information. So when the buyer found that out, you could say, hey, they probably didn't feel so good. So then that was a failure to disclose issue. Right. But the seller of that house, they probably hadn't thought, maybe they thought, hey, this is common sense, or everyone should know this, or maybe. So the bar is very high for disclosure in California.
Yeah. So in other words, if I'm going to sell as is, and you say to me, Mark, I think you should do something about the landscaping, and I say to you, Raziel, I just said as is, that means I'm not doing the landscaping. You can totally
do that.
Right.
Yeah, you're under no obligation to make any. You could just put on the market the way it is.
Do you run into many clients like that?
I do usually have several per year.
Yeah.
And I've done several of those sales.
To do the proper disclosures, but then say, I'm not painting this place, man. I'm not doing this. That's
correct. But I would say most of the time I'll advise, hey, if we can do these small things and invest in your property,
yep.
Because I've never had a client who's like, well, geez, I want the highest possible price.
But I don't want to do anything.
I don't want to do anything, Mark. Right? So it's like you can't have your cake and eat it too. So if you want the most money, the things that are inconvenient can cost you the most money. And selling a home is never convenient. Right. It's just a chore for many people.
Yep.
So hopefully an agent can help make that process a little bit smoother and be a good listener and all that. But for the as-is stuff, usually it's a good idea to do something.
Yeah. What is a seller actually legally responsible for?
Good question. So in California, there's two things a seller is required to do in an as-is sale. One is there needs to be smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors in appropriate locations throughout the property. And also the hot water heater needs to be braced and strapped.
That's it?
That's it. And then they're also required to fill out several different documents. One is called the seller property questionnaire. One is called transfer disclosure statement. And they ask the seller different questions about the history of the property.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about termite inspections or the home inspection in general?
Those are not required either.
Sewer lateral?
Burlingame, that is required. Good question.
Okay.
That's a point of sale requirement in Burlingame, Hillsborough, San Mateo now as of 2020.
Paid by the seller or paid by the buyer?
It's typically paid by the seller. However, it could be negotiated, but most of the time the seller is addressing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You made a great video on, I guess, the recent, I don't know what to call it, commission rates or commission charges.
It was a litigation, yeah.
Yeah. Has the rate changed? Commission rates changed? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a good question, Mark. So commission has always been negotiable and will continue to be negotiable. And there's always been a variety of fee structures that I have seen because I see the closing statement on every transaction, can see what the other agent was compensated. And the one thing that is consistent is that it's not fixed or consistent. I see a range in fee structures.
Fixed, yeah, right.
And so, the litigation that happened a few months ago, that it was a massive settlement that the National Association of Realtors was sued, and along with many brokerages agreed to the settlement. The two main takeaways is that, which I think are very consumer friendly and I'm very excited about. One is that buyers are required to sign what's called a buyer representation agreement with a buyer's agent should they wish to engage an agent to do something. So like, for example, if you're selling your home, Mark, now you would choose your agent, and then their agent is going to put a sign up in front of the house. They're going to market the home, take photos, et cetera, et cetera. And you would sign a piece of paper with them and say, what's your fee structure? And if that felt like it was a good fit for you, then you would sign that paperwork.
Right.
Historically, though, on the buyer side of the representation, that has not been a standard practice. Most agents have not presented a document to their buyer to formalize that type of relationship. I happen to have been doing that for over 15 years in my business, which is very straightforward. I represented hundreds of buyers where I'm like, hey, here's some paperwork. Here's what my fees are. How do you feel? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, and I don't know how deep you want to go into the weeds, but basically the seller compensation to the buyer's agent, sellers can continue to offer compensation to a buyer's agent. However, they can no longer do so in the MLS. And the idea is that buyer's agents who look in MLS, they will be no longer able historically, like if you looked in the compensation, it could say, agent, if you got paid X for this house, but you could get Y for another house. And so perhaps there are some agents who might say, well, geez, I could get paid more or less if I sell this particular home. And because agents didn't really sign these agreements to discuss fees in the beginning, then maybe the agent would get paid more and the client theoretically might not know this.
Yeah.
And you could call that steering.
Okay.
And so, for the good, honest agent, that's really a non-issue, but you can see why this is it's an important thing for the industry to take this leap
And
forward.
Is this a national thing? Is that what you're saying?
It's a
national
it's a
thing,
national
not just
thing.
California.
Yep. And so I think the goal is to kind of bifurcate fees, kind of like the seller pays their agent their fees,
right,
and the buyer pays their agent their fees, and everyone discusses what the fees are. Just like in the legal space, you could have a plaintiff attorney and a defense attorney, and each side pays their own fees.
Right.
And those fee structures, they could pay one attorney $200 an hour or $300 an hour, or someone else could be $800 an hour.
Yeah.
And it's totally up to the client to choose who they wish to choose at whatever price they feel comfortable with.
Okay.
So, pretty straightforward.
Thank you for the explanation.
Now you know more than you ever wanted to know about that.
I got more information going here. Oh, boy. Okay. When is a home considered too long on the market? Sometimes I hear, that home's been out there for blah, 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 blah. It's too long.
Yeah.
What's the deal? What's too long?
Well, I think it's really the seller's choice, right? There's two reasons why homes usually don't sell, and that's marketing or price. So hopefully the agent has done a good job marketing the property, good photography, good ad copy, doing all the right things. And then the other reason is price. So if a property's been on the market, typically in Burlingame, if something's been on the market more than 2-3 weeks and the marketing is pretty good, it's most likely going to be price related.
No
like the
kidding.
price might be too ambitious.
So you said 2 or 3 weeks, not 30 days, huh?
I think with the internet nowadays, we can typically know within a week how the market's responded to whatever price the seller has selected.
Right.
Because I'd say back in the day, before I was a realtor, the typical standard practice would be the agent would say, okay, your home is in Hillsborough. Your home is expensive in Burlingame. Therefore, I'm going to run a quarter-page ad in the Chronicle and the Sunday paper. You remember that?
I do.
The real estate section.
Yeah.
And then if you wanted to go to an open house, you couldn't go online or an app. You would just look in the Sunday paper. Oh, yeah, I'm going to go see that house on Trenton and Burlingame or Easton, whatever. And so it was all kind of based on that. And then after 3 or 4 weeks, the agent would say to the seller, well, do you think most people know about your house? And then the seller would probably say, what do you think? Yeah, most people probably know about my house, right, Mark? Mm-hmm. And now, but like, let's say you're in Hawaii for 2 weeks. Well, you wouldn't have known about the house because you didn't get the Chronicle in Hawaii.
Yeah.
But now it doesn't matter where you are. You know within 10 minutes of something coming in the market. So it's a fantastic process where the seller can kind of know very quickly how the market's responded. And we do have many properties that are in the market 4 weeks or 8 weeks. And, so that's just part of the strategy. But typically you have a good sense in the beginning.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say it's been out there for 3 weeks now, going on 4 weeks. You get together with the seller and say, look, we got to talk about some strategy here going forward. I guess that would be a possible price decrease, right?
That's right.
Does that give negative vibes to the people out there?
I think different people will have a different perspective on that. My view is a lot more nuanced. Like, if I have a buyer who's looking at a property and you're selling your home market and it's at $2.4 million and it's been on the market a few weeks, well, I think if buyers felt that 2.4 was a reasonable price, they probably would have bought it. So it's probably safe to say, hey, maybe that's an ambitious number. So then, but let's say my buyer can only afford $2.1 million, but the gap is 300 between the asking price. The buyer some people might say, hey, the buyer should just write a lowball offer for 2.1, but maybe they don't want to, maybe they feel the gap is too high, or maybe they don't want to, do that. But then if you adjust the price to 2.2 million, then the buyer might say, hey, this is now within what I can do. So the buyer's not going to, they might say, oh, well, what's wrong with the property, or why hasn't it sold? But it's not necessarily like the kiss of death.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, that could be one way to view it, but my view is, hey, that's what you got to do to get your home sold, is sometimes adjust the price.
Right.
Put it where buyers can feel comfortable.
Okay. What's a bridge sale? Am I using the right terminology here? Bridge sale. Sometimes people say to me, oh, we're going to sell our home, but we're going to buy one in Sacramento, but my home's got to sell to be able to buy that thing in Sacramento. I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, so that'd be like bridge financing. So you basically have a middleman, like someone who's a lender, like could be a banker, it could be a hard money lender, where they say, okay, we will give you X dollars because you have, say, no debt on the Burlingame property, or a very small loan, because you have so much equity, you have so much value in your house, and you want to buy first and then sell, because many people would rather buy first and then sell afterwards. They don't have to move twice and deal with that. So I had some clients a few years ago who owned a home in Burlingame, and they wanted to be near the grandkids in the East Bay, and of course their kids. So then they bought the home out there, and they call that bridge financing because it kind of acts as a bridge to pull money out of your Burlingame house and help you buy somewhere else.
Okay.
And then after you buy that home and then sell your Burlingame home, then you have a windfall of resources, of money that's coming your way, and then you can pay down that loan and then either refinance or just pay off the loan completely. So it's more like it was a short-term loan, typically at a higher interest rate, to just kind of help make that happen. And many people who do bridge financing, if you're retired, it's very attractive because most banks want to see a W-2 or see some type of consistent income. But if you're retired, the income might be a little bit different.
Yeah, big time. Fixed income, basically.
Could be fixed income. And the client or the homeowner could still have significant assets, but they just might not have a job.
Yeah. Going back to your stomping grounds of UCLA, Los Angeles in general, I understand they have a luxury tax on homes. Is that correct when I say that?
Yes, they do.
What does that mean?
I can't remember the dollar amount, but I think it was something, just say something like sales over $10 million would have a percentage tax.
So it's an added tax, in other words.
It was like a transfer tax.
Does San Mateo County have anything like that?
So we do have not like a wealth tax based on a minimum price point, but we do have a transfer tax countywide, which is $1.10 per $1,000 of transfer value. So on a $2 million sale, it's a couple grand.
Okay.
Typically, the seller will pay that as part of the transaction, the closing costs.
Okay.
San Mateo has a transfer tax of $5 per transfer, or per thousand of transferred value. Hillsborough has a small tax too, but these aren't based on purchase prices. They're more just, they create revenue for the city based on the value of the home that's sold.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
What advice would you have for a first-time home buyer? And I hate to say in Burlingame or San Mateo unless you come with a lot of loot, but what advice?
I would just say be patient, Mark. For someone who's a first-time buyer, I would say, look, you've obviously worked exceptionally hard, and what a gift and privilege to be in this position to afford to buy a home around here that might need a lot of work or whatever it is. And just to be patient and find the right place, because the goal is not to buy the property and have to sell it again in a few years, and you have transaction costs, commission, et cetera. The goal is hopefully you can be there for a really long time, and it's the right fit. So I do very little repeat business with my clients who have purchased, in the last few years. It's usually a very long cycle, which I think is a positive. Whereas you might see in other parts of the country, people move from a home that's $400,000 to a home that's $550,000 and then to $700,000.
Yeah.
But you really don't see that movement as much around here, just because these numbers are so significant.
Okay. What's your thoughts on these guys? On TV, sometimes you see this guy, John's Homes, for example. He'll say, we're going to buy your house for cash. Who are these guys, man? And how true is that? And what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, sure, it's true that they would buy your home in cash, but they're really just investors looking for a good deal. You know, I mean, the way to, if you're looking to get your highest price, is to put your home on the market, do the right steps, work with a good professional. But the idea, I mean, I don't want to say it's predatory, but it feels like if you're really trying to help someone maximize the price of their home, you want to do the right things. And so, but in that case, it's just someone saying, look, I'm going to give you cash because you might have a problem and you need to sell your home extremely fast.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I get those things in the mail too. And, you could just toss them.
Yeah. Makes me nervous but anyway.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah, good question.
Right. Let's see. How about advice for somebody that wants a youngster, a young person, young professional that wants to enter the profession of real estate? What advice would you have for them?
I mean, it is such a fantastic career. And I've been very grateful for the gifts that it's provided for.
How many years in now?
18 years.
18.
Yeah. Feels like forever.
Yeah.
But I would say, just want to get into it for the right reasons. Not because of watching the TV show and seeing the dollars that you can make. It's more just because if you enjoy helping people, I really enjoy participating in this exciting moment in people's lives. And that's a real privilege to share that. It's a position of trust that you're in.
Yeah.
You're working with a lot of money and there's a lot of emotion and you really want to feel comfortable with those things because they can also be a little combustible sometimes. And but that's really the advice that I'd give someone is make sure if you want to get into real estate, be prepared to do this as a career. It's something that's very difficult to do as a part-time professional. It's not difficult to get your real estate license, and perhaps that landed us in some of the litigation that my industry has had, with the licensing being a little bit on the easier side. But that would be my thought is just get into it because this is something that you love and you feel like you can make a difference for people.
Yeah. I would have a problem, I think, with a young person, say in the early 20s, and I know that's where you started out.
Sure,
you had to make it because of, you're dealing with a $2 or $3 million home or more. And that's a big investment, and I want to make sure that who's ever doing this job for me has some experience. You know what I mean? So I would imagine it's got to be hard for a young person to get established.
I would say it is hard, but that's with anything.
Yeah.
You're a first-year associate at a law firm. You're going to be billing more hours than the partner. The partner just needs to go out there and maintain the relationship, and they're working equally hard, but it's just a different type of challenge.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Wrap up and shout out time to family, friends, and colleagues. Go ahead and you have a wife, of course, and a son, right?
I have a wife. I have a son.
How long have you been married?
Been married 14 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. 14 great years.
Yeah.
And always look to others to see what I can learn and do differently.
Yeah.
And, always be a better partner, but I feel very grateful.
Yeah. How old's your son?
He's 10.
Great. And he's at the Carey School.
He's at the Carey School in San Mateo, entering 5th grade.
Yeah.
And my mom and dad still live in Burlingame.
That's terrific.
And they live near the fire station on California Drive.
Yeah.
I have a sister who lives in San Francisco.
Yeah. I think I remember her. She did a presentation at Rotary one time.
She did. Yeah. Good memory.
Yeah.
She does culinary experiences. So
terrific. Yeah. You sent me the website, the link. I have to check that out. That's pretty cool. Your son's over at Carey's in the 5th grade, right?
Yes.
Is that how far Carey goes? Or
Yes.
That's it, huh?
Yes.
Okay, good. I have to give Sarah a little shout out. That's bumped right up next to her, Sarah, my old high school.
Yeah,
so.
awesome.
Carey's been
Great
around
campus,
a long time. So.
for sure.
Okay, anybody else you want to mention before we close this up?
I'm just happy to be here, Mark, and always respected what you've done here with the podcast and all the amazing people that you've had here, and just delighted to be a guest on your local show.
Raziel Ungar, thank you so much for today.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
I'd like to thank Mr. Burlingame, Raziel Ungar, for being my guest today on Burlingame. It's a small town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. If you like our podcast, please hit the like button, make a comment, and subscribe. Thanks to the great Ray Tyler for videography, original music by Bray. You can hear more of Bray at braymusic.com. This podcast was recorded at the Burlingame Public Library on Monday, August 12, 2024. The Burlingame Historical Society copyrights this program, and no part can be copied and replayed without the written consent of the Burlingame Historical Society. So until next time, everyone, see you around Burlingame. It's a small town.